We know him as Stas. All right, he's a former U.S. Army officer. He's a supply chain and oil business executive, and he was an officer in the U.S. Army when you were in the Air Force as a Chief Master Sergeant there, Dennis Fritz. So he's got a great podcast, In the Eyes of Truth. And he's really a wonderful guy. He's back. He's in Moscow, or he's somewhere in Russia, and he's always got
Moscow.
You're in Moscow. Well, listen, we got three guys. We all want to hear what you have to say. They've been holding the fort down. You know Arnaud. You know Devlin.
Yes.
You know Joe Laurier and Chief Master Sergeant Dennis Fritz. So we've been talking about the situation in Iran and of course in Russia, and I want to go there with you first. Because I've seen you talking about driving around in Donbass, and I was there. I wouldn't go there now because of the intensity of the drone strikes. Can you tell us about that and who's behind it and how long is it going to last there? Floor is yours there.
Well, yeah, I was there last time 2 months ago. When the intensity really went up. There's always been drones, and there's always been artillery, and there's always been cluster munitions. I've watched and heard the rounds flying over my head, hitting into. I've got an aunt and uncle in Yasanavata, which is a frontline town and has been since 2014. And you standing there in the front yard and listening to 155 rounds flying overhead. I've been in Gorlovka on the road of death, which is at the edge of the city. There's a lot of burned out cars that have been destroyed by drones. There's a lot of burned out apartments in these big apartment buildings destroyed by drones. When they fly up an FPV drone up to people's windows and they look to see if people are in there, and then they blow up the apartment. Covering, doing a story on a market that just got hit by artillery round. Thankfully, it hadn't opened yet. So there's only one dead guy laying behind me, ripped up by a 155 round, who was getting ready to open his cookie stand. Things like that. And you listen, I brought in me and a friend of mine who has since died when he fell asleep behind the wheel of a car coming back from one of these runs. We were delivering actually mattresses and beds for children, for people that lost their apartments and everything they owned. You're listening to a U.S.-made cluster munition going off somewhere about 500 meters away from me. Go shoot, explodes over your head, and you can hear that pop, 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 pop as they go down. So that's always been there. That to some degree has always been there, and the people continue to live there. Well, then you have this terrorist organization, absolute terrorist organizations known as Palantir, come in, and Palantir drones are all over the place. The Hornet drone. They're AI.
Made by Palantir?
Absolutely.
Okay,
there's Palantir programming and Palantir made.
Wow.
So they're Palantir product. Coming to an American highway near you. If you don't think this is all going to come back to America, I've got a bridge to sell you.
It's right across the street from me. It's not the one that goes in Brooklyn. You can have it for $1. All right, go ahead.
Yeah, we'll move it to Arizona for you, right in the middle of the desert. Right. So you get these Palantir drones, the Hornet drones flying all over the place. These things are AI. They don't have a two-piston engine like the big drones. They're on a battery, and when the battery charge goes down 20%, they're no longer looking for something that looks like a military target. They're looking for anything that's moving. The one extreme, for example, of what they would hit 2 months ago, they took out an 11 and 12-year-old boys on a bicycle. They were both riding the same bicycle, and the Palantir drone flew in and took them out. Murdered them. I mean, let's put it another way. So we went down there. I couldn't go to my aunt and uncle because the road was just too dangerous now. I mean, I've been down that road between Gorlovka and Yasanavata when you're hearing artillery rounds popping off behind you as you're flying down this road that's already pot marked with shell holes. And there's drones in the air, but they weren't as fast as these drones. These drones are faster. But these drones are still slow enough to shoot down. So what the Russian military did is they went Mad Max. If you're not familiar with the technicals are started in Africa where Toyota sells these their white pickup trucks by the hundreds, literally by the hundreds. And these technicals, they started in Chad, and it's spread throughout Africa and other places. They basically they in the bed of the pickup they put a gun mount, and then you can mount different things on there: machine guns of different caliber, recoilless rifles, rocket launchers. There, I've seen one technical that was on a video that they actually try to make it into. It was in Syria. They tried to make it into a multiple launch rocket system, wound up burning the whole car down. You know, thanks for trying. You lose. But that was the more extreme case. But the Russian military now has these same technicals surrounding the refineries and other places, and they brought them down to the Mariupol Rostov interstate that was getting hit by these drones. And these drones, they come in there. And by the way, when they start hitting civilian targets, Palantir's calling it clearing logistical lanes, murdering civilians.
I can't believe it. And my name, they're doing that? My country's name, Palantir, and Peter Thiel's down there in a bomb shelter, nuclear, reinforced bomb shelter in Buenos Aires. That's where he is. You know?
Yep. And you know where he left because he said that he'll come back to America when the troubles are over. You got to love that. But so what Russia did was they deployed a battalion of anti-aircraft, in this case gun trucks, because these for as deadly as these Palantir drones are to cars, they're easy enough to shoot down with light machine guns. Right. And that's what they've been doing. Last count, I think it was 1,400 plus drones that were shot down.
Wow.
But these drones also, by the way, they do remote mining, which means they drop a landmine on the road as they're flying by. And I had some friends that did a run to Zaporozhye to bring some supplies in there. They were military, and they're all former officers. Well, they're never really a former officer, so they're officers in reserve. So they didn't freak out when the civilian car in front of them blew up. Running over one of these mines. And the majority of the traffic, by like 96% plus of this traffic is civilian cars. And when one of these cars blows up, you don't stop. You keep going because those drones are in the air. And if you slow down or stop, they'll target you next.
Wow. Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And they were going after semis, just anything that was moving because they couldn't find military targets. Military is much harder. Well, what in Donbass, what the Russian army did, like I said, they want more Mad Max because they don't have enough of these pickups, Patriot pickups to convert. They just took any hatchback car, took out the hatchback, put a gun mount on there, and a light machine gun, 7.62 millimeter machine gun. So you got a gunner and a driver, and they're doing escorts for all the military trucks. One gun car with one truck. Unfortunately, civilians don't get that. So we were driving there. I got warned by my military friends there. I got warned which roads you can take, which you can't take. So I couldn't go see my aunt because it was just that road was closed. They had 6 cars in 5 days murdered. They took out 6 civilian cars full with civilians in them, obviously. Wow. We had to go further in, deeper in. I used to go straight to the front lines. You can't do that anymore, especially in a car. You just die. The last 5-10 kilometers, you got to huff it. But the near rear, like Avdiivka, we'd go there. I mean, I've had drones taken out right over my head in Avdiivka, places like that. But now for then, at least 2 months ago, it was extremely dangerous because they just flooded them with these Palantir drones. Wow. So that was off limits. And we were driving, seriously off limits to everybody, unless need be. And then where we were driving, we're about 30 kilometers from the front. And these drones, I was warned, between sunrise, which is 4 in the morning, and 9 in the morning, they're really hunting civilians for whatever reason. That's the worst time to be in there. And then we're driving around. Like I was going after some of my contacts, my friends were there in a military truck. And I'm keeping that 30-meter distance behind them. Like, if we stop and run, yes, I know. I stopped my car and we all run too because we didn't have a gun car with us. Wow. But that's the reality in those areas. And these drones, like I said, they'll target civilian cars with no issues.
Wow.
And they're on remote control.
That's very
so
scary. That's very scary there. I'm not going
I'll
back
say,
there, by the way. I was thinking about going back, but I'm not going back there. I went there, and I was in an armored vehicle with Arnaud, and we would be wiped out in just a few seconds. You know what I mean? You can't.
and I'm in a civilian. I'm in a civilian SUV. So yeah.
Wow.
But
you better get a Mini Cooper.
Yeah. Next time I'm going to be on foot with a rucksack, and hopefully they'll loan me an assault rifle just in case.
Right.
Right. I ain't getting taken prisoner.
Right. No.
If it does that. Well, you got the problem is you got recon and sabotage units all over the place.
Well,
Russia's got them, and the Ukrainians send them out too. So but if you're in the rear, within 5, 6, maybe even 10 kilometers. You can pop up on one of these recon units once in a while. So it's rear, but isn't rear.
Right.
So yeah, you get the moments like that. I had a friend. We were at this one rear base that was R&D base and recoup base, and supply base, and they're maybe 30 kilometers in the rear. But they had some Ukrainians, and they brought up some local morons. And one summer, 2 years ago, they were riding around on mopeds, setting fire to everything, including some local villages that they burned down, throwing Molotov cocktails. Well, as the guy said, we caught them. Wow. They're no longer an issue.
Wow.
If you get my point.
All right. Listen, we only have 15 minutes left, and I want to bring in, both Arnaud, you know him already, but Joe, you have a quick, easy question to throw at Stas, and then Chief Master Sergeant that relates to anything, because he knows everything. Stas knows everything, seriously, about the oil. I mean, he's like a jack of all trades, to the 10th power. He knows, and he's an expert on all of them. So, Joe, if you have anything a short question for Stas.
I'd just like to ask him, thank you for that fascinating account that you've given us. What is going on with the Black Sea and the land blockade now, and the Odessa? Is that really on the radar now of Russia? Is that going to come up soon? An attack?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Odessa. When we talk Odessa province, and not just Odessa, there are 7 forts in Odessa. 3 of them are on the Danube. The other 4 are on the actual Black Sea, and with Odessa being the main one. Russia's done strikes on Odessa, but they were like cautionary retaliatory strikes. Onesies, twosies, nothing concrete. Now Russia, after NATO, might as well call it NATO, because that's the only way you can explain that, because the Ukrainians definitely don't have satellite guidance systems. After they went after all the shipping in the Sea of Azov, after they've gone after shipping in the eastern Black Sea, including Turkish ships, by the way, and Azerbaijani ships. I mean, it's not just Russian ships. It's whatever's moving, they'll target it. I spent a couple of days when I was on vacation down in Anapa, which is we were about 100 kilometers southeast of the bridge, the Kerch Bridge. And then we spent a couple of days on the Azov Sea in Krasnodarsky Krai, in the southern Azov Sea, right when the Ukrainian drones struck in eastern Zaporozhye on the western Azov Sea. They struck a resort, killed a dozen people in their sleep, and injured 2 dozen more. We were one row of houses away from the beach, and all night long you could hear the drones being taken out, because there's Panzer systems up and down the area, and the Panzers have 4 rocket launchers, and they have an autocannon. But these were being taken out with the autocannons. You hear that, trrr, boom, trrr, boom, and like that every 10, 20, 30 seconds, a minute, and all night long. So they're losing hundreds of these drones over the Azov Sea that they were sending in to try to get into deeper into Russia. Because flying across Zaporozhye, it's only about 50, 60 kilometers, and they're over the Azov Sea. But the Panzer systems are taking them out. So Russia retaliated, and Russia closed the ports. They're hitting anything and everything that moves. And Ukraine, by the way, remember that the back in everybody knows 9/11, 9/10. Rumsfeld came out and admitted that the Pentagon had failed their first ever audit, and they couldn't account for $1 trillion worth of equipment. And then 9/11 happens, and everyone forgets about it. Well, the last audit, the Pentagon couldn't find about almost $2 trillion worth of equipment. So yeah, it's only growing in size. This is, by the way, the sixth audit that they failed. 6 audits, 6 failures. Well, Ukraine was one of those places that things like 777 howitzers were disappearing and going offshore. There was an American, I don't remember which NGO it was. There was an American NGO that was about a year and a half ago. They published a report that a third of the tube artillery that the U.S. had given Ukraine was never reaching the front lines. It basically goes in the bow of a ship in plastic, gets covered in grain, and off it goes to some other country. And believe you me, the Pentagon knows it's disappearing. I'm pretty sure somebody's getting kickbacks in the Pentagon off this. There's just too much heavy equipment disappearing. Yeah. You know, $2 trillion worth of equipment missing is that's a lot of.
It's a great racket.
I mean, granted, it's not in 1 year; it's over the entire span. But still, that's a lot of money.
$2 trillion. My God.
So they've closed that down, and Ukraine is looking, by the way, at a $50 billion loss to its economy. That, by the way, the Americans and the Europeans are going to have to make up. The European, from what early reports are coming in, the European crop yield this year is going to be down 40%. So they need that Ukrainian crop yield to back end their failure from not having diesel and not having fertilizer. So to make sure the lower classes at least aren't starving in Europe, which they will be. So that's the reality. Yeah, it's very real. Russia's now striking pretty much anything moves in and out. And since equipment is being snuck in and out of Ukraine in the bowels of civilian ships, every ship's suspects. Any ship coming in is going to get hit. Maersk has already said they're not going to allow any of their ships. And Lloyd's of London's not insuring anything coming in and out because it's just too dangerous. Russia escalated, and it's got escalation dominance in the area, whether anybody wants to admit it or not.
Maybe that's what you do that's what you do on vacation. You listen to drones exploding. Very interesting.
I was watching drones flying over my head. You got to understand Russians. Russians don't get phased. We're sitting in an APA, and there was 4 to 10 air siren drills going off every single day. And you're watching some of these drones flying overhead. And, the lifeguards just out. Everybody needs to evacuate the beach. And everybody's like, yeah, okay, whatever. We're just continue laying out there. And, when we go to Avdiivka, and every day they have drones flying over Avdiivka, and they've got civilian construction workers repairing buildings and building new apartment buildings.
Wow. Well, by the way, maybe Geico might if you make some kind of deal with the lizard there, the Geico lizard, to insure those ships. Chief Master Sergeant, you guys were in the service at the same time. Certainly, you would have a question for your fellow service member who was an officer there.
Yeah. Well, I must tell you, no, this has been educational for me. This is learning for me. So for the sake of time, I really don't have a question, but I'll just make one quick comment when you're talking about the Pentagon spending, probably 20 years of my life in the Pentagon. I can tell you, I'm not surprised it's not passing an audit. If you think about, and John, you probably heard, the black world money, that we just spread all over the world and what that means in layman's terms for your audience, just think about Afghanistan war, Taliban, where we were giving folks, bags of money to give to the warlords, to make little secret deals. And so I'm not surprised at the audit. And then the cost overruns that we have in our weapon system, in particular the F-35, that's probably the most costly. Yeah. So I understand where he's coming from. I just wanted to add that part. I know I would never pass an audit.
I commanded a tank platoon twice. Had that opportunity a second time, and we had very short command times the first time because they were sending this massive amount. Like every second armor lieutenant was getting shoved to Germany in the mid '90s. I don't know why, but it just went that way. So they're shoving them everywhere they could find. So a lot of guys never got a first platoon command. So I got lucky in that. But you're in Europe. This is the mid '90s. 95, 96. So you think you're in the front, right? You just 5 years before that was the front edge we're right there. Our deployment area in the case of World War III would have been about 15 kilometers from Vilseck, Germany, where I was stationed. And out of my tank platoon, one tank you could rely on, two were questionable, and a fourth was always broken. And they were broken because we didn't have spare parts. We didn't have spare parts. We didn't have money. And I remember our master mechanic, this staff sergeant, running in one day. We've got money. We've got to put orders in. We got 12 hours to put orders in. Give me your list quickly. Give me your list. And they're running back off to get the list in. It's like, wow, we got money for just, for an entire year. One time you get your break, you get cash in. And it's insane. And you look at the budgets, and you look at the fact that my enlisted guys that were married were all on food stamps, and all my sergeants had a second job, and their wives were working a job. They would have final formation at 5:30 in the evening, and they're off to another job till 9 or 10 in the evening. I mean, that's piss poor. I mean, any way you look at it, that's just
that's
piss
what
poor.
drives me, John, and you probably went on earlier. And in your terminology, being in Scott's, being in the Air Force, I was the command sergeant major of the Pacific, command sergeant major of NORAD and Space Command. And so, as you know, my responsibility was to take care of the enlisted men and women. And that's why I'm on this crusade and bandwagon now, how we get them into these illegal wars in the Middle East, if you will, on their backs.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I love when civilians, by the way, say, we support the troops. Well, if you support the troops, take them out of the friggin' wars that they don't need to be in.
No more said. I said that earlier. I'm tired of hearing, we support the troops. Thank you for your service. But get us out of these illegal, ill-advised wars. No more said.
Yep.
No more said for me, Randy. He dropped the mic on that.
You guys are going well together. Listen. I love this discussion between someone in the Air Force and someone in the Army. That it's a nice discussion. So keep it going for a few minutes.
Well, no, he knows about C-130s and C-141s. We drop them off and we keep going. Unfortunately, and they fight the battles. We just drop them off and we keep moving.
We were flying to do a recon mission to Macedonia, which we were getting ready to deploy in. So our battalion, it was 1st Battalion, 3rd Brigade, 1ID. All the officers, all the senior COs were on the C-130. It was bad enough we took off like 4 hours later than we're supposed to. So we were just in summer uniforms. It was cold as hell in Rhine-Main that morning. We were curled up in plastic to stay warm because we get there at 5 in the morning. I was like, wow, we lift off at 9 or 10, somewhere around there. And it's a 4-screw plane, and we're sitting down the length of the plane, not sides like regular planes. We're sitting down length, and the plane, we're over the Carpathians. It's not like a 4-hour flight, even with a C-130. And you see the crew chief run out. He looks in one porthole, runs over, looks in another porthole, runs to the other side, looks in one porthole, looks at another, runs back in. You're sitting there like, that ain't good. Whatever just happened, that ain't. And then the pilot comes on. We're going to have to turn around. We lost one of our engines. Like, wait a minute, this thing can fly on one engine. Why the hell? Fine, we lost one. We're halfway there. So we turn around, fly back to Rhine-Main, and my CO, he goes over to the pilot. It's like, it's like 3 o'clock in the afternoon by the time we land and everything because we had to turn around. He's like, so what time are we flying back off? He's like, oh, tomorrow. Well, what do you mean tomorrow? Well, first of all, it's after 2 o'clock, so the mechanics all went home. Like, wait a minute, what? And second, he's like, oh, by the way, and we didn't lose one engine, we lost 3. So they didn't want to panic us.
That one, but Randy, for you in the audience, there goes right there. You got the Army officer, you got the senior enlisted.
You guys are great.
And we
together.
do this for one another. Yeah, when you talk about us going to war,
you guys got to do.
We defend one another and we take care of one another.
You got to put him on your You got to put him on your podcast there, Stas, which is called "In the Eye of Truth." You guys got a lot to talk about. I'll give you his email address later on.
Yeah, by all means, please. I'll write. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
I've seen you on a couple different shows. So and on Judge Napolitano, I think one of them.
Yeah, I've been on the Judge a number of times. Yeah,
Danny Davis. You were on Danny Davis the other day.
Yeah, I've been on Danny a couple times.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I was just on with Danny earlier this week.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you're all over the place. You're very busy there. Let me go to you, Arnaud. I know you know each other. In fact, the reason why I got Stas on, which is a great get, is because of you. You hooked us up. And so do you have any question you'd like to ask? I mean, you're in Russia, but maybe he has something that you don't know about. Arnaud.
Yes, well, I kind of wanted to get Stas' feel for this those rumors about full all-out mobilization. I mean, has he heard anything about this? What does it look like? Uh, do we have what we need to wrap this up by the end of the year, or what's going on?
I've heard rumors, but I haven't heard anything. The thing with rumors, until you hear it officially from the government, and I've got a lot of friends, and I know more than a few deputies in Parliament. Nobody's saying anything, but what has been said is wait till after the elections. So we'll see what the election.
Which ones? Ones here.
The 20th of September is the parliamentary elections in Russia. I tell you this: the party power or the power party, let me rephrase that, has been United Russia, which has a supermajority, and it's had it for quite a while. It looks like they're going to lose supermajority. They are more like they'll still keep the majority, but I think they'll lose supermajority. And from the right, they've got LDPR, the Liberal Democratic Party, which isn't liberal. It's the Conservative Party coming up, and from the left, they've got the Communist Party coming up, and both of them are demanding a lot firmer action against the Europeans and against Ukraine. So depending on the elections, also what the makeup if United Russia has to form a coalition government, that's going to change things a lot. So we'll see. 20th of and by the way, they're looking for they're taking foreigners right now for election observers. So if anybody wants to go, this is the opportunity.
I missed my deadline. I found out about it yesterday. I would love to go, but I missed my deadline. It was yesterday, so I can't.
Oh, is it yesterday? Okay.
Yeah, so I just found out from Arnold. I said, that'd be an interesting experience as long as I don't have to cover the elections in Donetsk or Mariupol because I'm allergic to Palantir drones, all right?
And just for the sake of saying that, the quality of the people, they have massive turnouts. They have massive turnouts. Regardless of the danger, people go and they vote. In mass.
Yeah, but that doesn't happen here. The massive turnout would be 33%. All right, Joe, I'm going to let you throw. We have like 5 minutes left, so I'm going to give you the opportunity to ask one of the last, if not the last question, to our dear friend Stas the Great. Stas the Great. Joe?
Does anyone there really believe the war could be over at the end of the year in Ukraine? How would that happen?
Look, by the end of this summer, by the end of this month, more than likely, Aryokov will fall. And then there'll be the advance toward Zaporozhye because it's pretty open area. And then the next fortification line is around Zaporozhye itself, and it's one of those field fortifications. I'll probably say by the end of September, maybe by the end of October, the Tri-City area, the Druzhinka, Kramatorsk, Slaviansk is going to fall. And Porsche is going to fall because it's already been cut off by air, our heavy artillery, rocket artillery, and drone dominance over the fields behind it. There's no place to fall back. And once the rain starts, those fields will go to mud, and they're really not going to be able to get anything in and out. And that area is just going to fall. Eastern Kharkov will fall by that point. Maybe Sumy is going to be in play fully instead of just outside Sumy. But this isn't going to be over by the end of the year, like it or not. And if the Europeans decide to really play war. But here's the point, too. Russia's producing well over 1,000 combat tanks a year right now, brand new. Plus, it's updating the old T-72 chassis, putting in the new T-90 turrets on them. So I don't know how many of those. I know the numbers. I'm not going to say the numbers, but it's well over 1,000. Those tanks aren't going to the battlefield. Those are being stored up for the big war with the Europeans.
Wow.
Because when the Europeans, and there's massive amount of missiles that are being stored up, and Russia's not on a war economy. This is 6-7% of GDP. War economy is 30 to 40% of GDP or more. They hear the Europeans, every day, these knuckle-dragging, mouth-breathing, inbred morons that pass for leadership in Europe are screaming about, let's have war, we're going to have poo-pooing themselves because Putin gave the order, start seizing ships.
Wow.
You know, the British, well, they were pretty sure Russia wouldn't respond, and Russia's like, in the Pacific, let's start grabbing British ships for inspections. There's nothing the British can do. The Queen of the Seas can't get out of a puddle. You know, we saw what happened in Iran. They sent one destroyer out of port. It broke down, and the channel had to go back. Yeah. The rest of their fleet's all sitting there taken apart. You know, they can't get a single ship out, really, outside these small cutters that they've used to grab transport ships. So, you know, but I mean, they keep talking about it, and they are being heard. And they're being taken seriously. Wow. I don't know if they're stupid enough to do it, but I'm afraid they are stupid enough to do it.
It's about it's dumb. It'd be really crazy to do it. It's like this whole idea of going to try to invade Pickaxe Mountain, which I thought was a ride at the Six Flags over Texas.
They should make it a ride at Six Flags.
So, which I wouldn't take, but I won't even go on the Cyclone over here in Coney Island. And at any rate, we got 1 minute. Any last got 1 minute? First, I want to thank Joe Loria from Consortium News. I want to thank Arnaud Devalet, the human rights attorney and the wonderful journalist who took me around. It was him that took me up and down in that scary ride up the Sour-Mogia with all those pedal mines on the left and right. And then, of course, my good friend, Chief Master Sergeant Dennis Fritz. This has really been a very wholesome, entertaining for me. And Reggie, did you like this? Reggie Johnson said, keep it going.
Yeah.
Because we had another guest. Yeah. Reggie said, blow the other guest off.
No.
That we're going to change the subject. And Reggie said, run with it. And I listened to him. All right. So, and you got 1 minute to sum it up there, Stas, and I want you back soon.
Absolutely. I want to apologize. I was late. I was on a radio station in the city center. So it took me a little while to get it took me 2 hours to get home. Traffic and everything. Look, Russia is not going to retaliate against civilians. It doesn't. If you look, 300-400 hits and maybe 2-3 guys get killed. It's usually it's the guards or wrong place, wrong time. Russia strikes at night to destroy these facilities. Ukraine strikes at night. It's striking mostly, or Ukraine/NATO is striking mostly civilian houses, apartment buildings, because people are home and asleep. And every day you're getting 10, 20, 30 civilians killed. Onesies, twosies here, sometimes larger groups. So you're dealing with very different approaches to warfare. But having said that, Ukraine is going to be taken apart. It is being taken apart. It's going to continue being taken apart. The unfortunate part is the Ukrainian government. None of those people are ever planning on dying of old age in Ukraine. And the population of Ukraine is just meat to make money off of.
It's really too bad because these are Slavs killing Slavs and people.
Well, these are Russians.
Ukrainians are Russians. Ukrainians are Russians. Maybe the Western Ukraine. But maybe Western Ukraine, which are Polish and Hungarians. We have to talk about another day what really composed. This is Russia. I mean, it was Catherine the Great. And Kiev was where the what is it called? The Orthodox Russian Church. That was its headquarters, right? But that's for another day.
At one point, yes.
Yeah, at one point. But at any rate, somebody in Constantinople took a bribe and somehow gave it to a new Orthodox church that's Ukrainian. But that's for another day.
It was heretics that they were excommunicated heretics,
right?
Which the Patriarch of Constantinople had no right to intervene in.
Right.
But
we'll have to save that. I want to thank you all, and I'll talk to you very soon. We're going to go out. This is thank you so much, Stas. I'll talk to you later today.
Thank you.
This is from Gold Diggers 30.